Ooh, just a little more Hikaru. You could replace Miyuki on the front of this folder. May I suggest investing in fish islands? This week, we opened with Hikaru helping, or at least trying to help Ryo do some spring cleaning at the observatory. In the middle of it, Hikaru ended up asking what his favorite constellation was. Not too surprisingly for anyone who had seen episode 6, he chose the Southern Cross.
Look, there's inductive reasoning, there's deja vu.
No, we don't need that clip today. There's actually new stuff in this episode. Yeah, anyway, Ryo went on to explain how, in spite of the fact that it's physically one of the smallest constellations, the Southern Cross has had a ton of cultural significance, having been used as a guiding point for many explorers ever since the man who originally found this country discovered it, as well as the symbol in many flags of different countries. So yeah, it's a pretty awesome constellation that ended up opening Pandora's box this week. We then got the opinion, oh come on, aren't they tired of these previews for Miracle Universe yet? I think we've seen most of the movie at this point. Anyway, that actual bit of redundancy aside, the main part of this week's episode opened with Hikaru gathering her team together to go on a little excursion to go see the Southern Cross. Understandably, her friends were hesitant of just going to outer space willy-nilly. In particular, Monica brought up the fact that her father was doubling down on his MIB work. However, a few meme-worthy faces somehow managed to win them over. Either that, or maybe this face is meant to help sell their gummy candies. It does look very stretchy and chewy. Still, just as Monica mentioned, her father caught a glimpse of them leaving the atmosphere. On top of that, once they did reach space, Hikaru couldn't find the Southern Cross because, well, of course there were a lot of other stars in space.
I did not think that through!
You know, I could go on about how dumb it is for the supposed astronomy nut not to remember the fact that the sky from the Earth looks a lot different than the one from the thermosphere, but this does play into an important aspect of this week's episode, so I'll just hold off for now. Anyway, even though she couldn't draw the Southern Cross for Ryo like she was hoping, Hikaru did get a constellation prize, no pun intended, with her pendant pointing towards the Aries zodiac. Meanwhile, the Note Raiders HQ, Gallagher was treating the generals out on their recent failures, in particular I-1. Yeah, crazy thought here, Urotaros, but maybe you should have told her that the first time she cost your team a star pin. However, in spite of their failures, the higher power they all worked for gave the generals a little power boost, with the exception of Bakinyan. I'm guessing he just saw the new Pet Cemetery movie and isn't in the mood to work with cats right now. Back with the Precure, Hikaru's pendant pointed towards the planet Kumamushi or Water Bear. And going by that name, Hikaru imagined what the inhabitants would look like. Just as a little reminder that the head writer made Mofurun a thing. And yet apparently they're having copyright issues with Cure Mofurun. Don't ask me how that works. However, as soon as they left their ship, they were greeted by one of the inhabitants. I'm getting a lot of mileage with that clip. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing for this show. Also, apparently this guy is voiced by Tetsu from Gintama. Well, okay, maybe we just take a closer look at him. He won't look all that bad. Oh, who am I kidding? Also, they discovered that the planet's gravity was twice that of Earth's, so basically it was like King Kai's planet. Even though that thing is a tiny little rock that should have much weaker gravity, but at the same time it exists in a different plane of reality and all that, so let's not get into semantics there. Anyway, after explaining their situation, the inhabitant named Kumu volunteered to act as the Precure's guide. Since his species had evolved on this planet, he was naturally used to its gravity, unlike our heroines who could barely walk a few meters away from their ship. I would question why they don't try to transform into Precure to buffer their fortitude, as this can't be good on their bodies in general, but I have to admit, Lala struggling is pretty damn adorable. Prudence also took this time to compare the inhabitants of this planet to water bears, or tardigrades, an actual microanimal on our planet who just so happen to look like the inhabitants of this one. Yeah, they were obviously taking time for this episode to explain what this guy was based on. Nice gesture and everything, but at the same time in situations like this, I think it's better just to let the audience do their own research and be surprised by what they find out, as opposed to taking up time in the episode just to spell it out for them. I'll give it this, I like the fact that they showed how tardigrades became the dominant species on this planet by having the Precure struggle through the rapid climate changes of this planet. Eventually, their search led to a field of diamonds where they believed the star pen was buried. And just as they stumbled upon this, the generals stumbled upon them. They transformed, and as I predicted, the gravity didn't have that much effect on their Precure forms. I-1 went to look for the star pen while her fellow generals dealt with the Precure. And thanks to the boost from their higher power, they actually managed to push the Precure back and show their differing skill sets in an effective manner, with Kapard coming off as clearly the best fighter of his team, and Tenjo now having buffing skills on top of her usual tactical commands. Yet, while Tenjo was technically the most effective villain this week, Kapard remained the best overall, being able to express his very nihilistic viewpoints, as well as hinting at some deeper personal issues. In the middle of the fight, I-1 found the star pen, and for the first time we got to see the process she used to turn them into dark pens, using a device that looks like an ink bottle. Ooh, I just hope the kids don't imitate this show and try to dunk their star pens into stuff. You gotta protect the resale value on these little trinkets. And in an instant, Bagyan became my second favorite villain of this show, as he wisely prevented I-1 from using her new dark pen and possibly give the Precure an opening to steal it back. Goes to show even he's getting tired of this fake Valley Girl's antics. Good job, bro. All of this prompted Hikaru to bust out her Tauros pen, which wasn't a wise idea when Kapard was right in front of her, and he managed to steal that one too. With that, him and Tenjo's troops launched one giant attack to KO all of the Precure at once. Utterly defeated, the Precure would have had the remainder of their pens taken had it not been for a well-timed distraction by Fua and Lala's remote control for her ship. From there, Prudence yet again proved to be one of the best fairy partners of all time by even making Tentacles look heroic. They managed to escape, and just as they did, the villain's power boost faded. However, I-1 still had other plans that even shocked New Best Cat. Thus, the episode ended with the Precure retreating after a devastating defeat, Hikaru in particular taking it the worst, and crash landing back on Earth with Madoka's father getting a clear view of it all. While the previous episodes were okay-ish, they were starting to derail this show's momentum, so thankfully Murayama came back this week to do some course correction by producing a pretty great episode. Again, while previous episodes weren't bad per se, many of them did fall into the trap of just repeating previous story elements. Madoka's issues with her father, Lala's inability to work with her human compatriots, and pretty much just Tenjo in general. I think certain writers just weren't willing to take the risk of making any drastic changes to the series' plot, even though I'd argue stagnation is just as bad. Thus, it came down to the head writer to take the initiative and thankfully give us a whole bunch of new stuff, including a brand new and much more interesting alien planet, and the villains actually getting their time to shine. From the oil and water team of Kapard and Tenjo actually creating an effective team to even the underpowered Bakugan showing more sense than his superior. All too often in Precure, all but one of the evil generals come off as incompetent, and while personality-wise Kapard is still best villain, and I-1 is worst, for this episode at least, they came off as an effective collective force. Then, of course, came the thing I was hinting at earlier, Hikaru's poor decision-making. I've made it no secret that I'm not the biggest fan of our little astrologist in training, but based on the next episode preview, they're finally going to address these issues. Hikaru from episode 1 of this series has been making many reckless and kind of callous decisions. Granted, many of them were done with the best of intentions, like rescuing Fua or relieving Lala of her stress. However, they still lack foresight, and this fact caught up with Hikaru this week. Not only did her search for the Southern Cross initially lead her friends on a wild goose chase, she also exposed them to Madoka's father in spite of her warnings and cost them a star pen. Now, normally, I'd be fuming over the blatant stupidity of our main protagonist, but going by the end of this episode, and the next episode preview as I mentioned, it seems like they're not going to just sweep this under the rug, and Hikaru will finally acknowledge her recklessness. And while I would have appreciated stuff like this happening a little earlier in the series, I'm glad it's at least happening now. Again, I think the writers other than Murayama should take at least a few more risks. But other than that, and the kind of needless tardigrade lecture, this was a great episode that has me interested in next week's and its blatant new product shilling. Sorry for the late upload, by the way. As I mentioned last week, there was a local anime convention that I wanted to attend. I had a great time, and the little break from these reviews gave me time to recharge my creative juices. As such, the next Star Twinkle review will be out at its regular 10 a.m. Pacific time, barring any unforeseen circumstances. But as I also mentioned last week, I'm going to another con with a friend on the mainland over Easter weekend. Sorry that I'll end up leaving you guys hanging again, but I'll still try to get that episode review up as soon as I can. I'll even try to write up the script on the plane ride back. And until then, though, farewell for now, my friends, and... You have a dentist appointment tomorrow at 9. Oh, would you look at that? I think there's another con over there I should go to.